after the pandemic, I got a lot of reels about real estate and I got into it. So I listened to some webinars and I read a book. It's from Bigger Pockets.
Okay. Can I house hack in New York City? People will go online, look on Zillow, they'll see the house prices, they'll say, nope, I'm gonna go look at apartments now.
And we started looking at Williamsburg and then I think the price
Pushed us out,
Yeah.
It will be more work. It is, and I'll be doing more of that work, fixing things and painting and all that. We had it vacant. Yeah.
Okay. So can you talk about how you felt through it, what the actual issue was and how we sort of overcame it?
And we were like, oh, there are so many apartments that we like. We're not going to have any issues finding an apartment.
Sure.
We'll be done, we'll move in, everything will be good. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Close by Mo podcast. I'm sitting here with two of my most recent clients in Bushwick, Mike and Yeji. We'll go through a couple of questions that other people have actually asked me when they're shopping around for multifamily homes or house hacking, or specifically in Bushwick. But before I go into that, can you guys give us a little bit of background about what your experience is in real estate, if you have family that's already investing, and if you want to just introduce yourself to the listeners or the viewers?
Sure. So I don't think either of us really had any experience in real estate. Both have been renters in New York for a long time and wanted to buy. I'm sure we'll get into it, but we both, we were looking at condos and multifamily. Weren't exactly sure which way we wanted to go. But yeah, I don't think anyone in my family is really.
Your
Really?
cousin.
Yeah, I guess I do have a cousin that's invested in a couple properties, I think, in Ohio.
Okay.
So we did talk to him once or twice
Mm-hmm.
to get some advice, and I think he was kind of tired of being a landlord, actually. But
Does he have single family properties or apartments in Ohio? Or
I think he was doing condos.
yeah, I think
Oh, yeah. But I think he's out of it now.
he's done?
he's like in managing it. And
Okay.
with it.
Yeah, it can get a little bit cumbersome. I'm dealing with some tenant issues now. But what about you, Yeji?
We both, I don't think, have any experience, but I think after the pandemic, I got a lot of reels about reels and I got into it. So I listened to some webinars and I read a book. It's from Bigger Pockets.
Okay.
And then I got into house hacking, and then I wasn't really sure if that's feasible in New York City. And then I think that's how I found your YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I was researching if it's feasible in New York City, and then I found
That one YouTube video, can I house hack in New York City? Yeah, that's so fun.
Was that literally you searched?
Yeah, that's one of my most top hit YouTube, because so YouTube tells me when when people drop off in the videos and everything, and so that one might not have the most views, but it has the highest engagement and people watch it through and through. And it's just because of what I realized was most of my clients that end up closing and specifically want house hacking, they all fit certain criteria, and I speak about that criteria in the video too. And everyone that reaches out is like, dude, I'm exactly in that bucket. I need to talk to you about something about house hacking in particular. Can you actually give a little bit of background about the way we started the process for you? Because for everyone that's watching, listening, most folks are probably watching or listening to this because they're like, hey, I want to get into the real estate game. They just know that they're going to be living in New York City for a while, just like you guys. And they know that they don't want to keep renting anymore. They want to buy something. And what will happen is people will go online, look on Zillow, they'll see the house prices, they'll say, nope, I'm going to go look at apartments now. I think that was very similar for you both as well, because we started actually looking at condos, I believe, in Brooklyn. I remember around the Karen Park, the very first apartment that we saw too. So can you talk a little bit about what happened throughout that process, through that discovery process that made you go, actually, I think a multifamily home will be better for us?
So Yeji had been doing the research about house hacking. I think she was always more interested in a multifamily house hack. I think I was open to it, but definitely leaning more towards condo.
Okay.
To start. So I think our kind of discovery phase, we split it up. I think you'd recommended that we look at a bunch of condos first, and then versus seeing both at the same time and having a hard time filtering between the two. So yeah, we were looking around North Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Greenpoint, a little bit of Bushwick, East Williamsburg. And there just wasn't really that much that had everything we were looking for and was within our budget.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple that were over our budget that looked good. But not even just like the, you see the estimate on Zillow or Street Easy of like what the monthly payment is, but then the actual monthly
It's a different
payment is usually
because you have like your maintenance, you have the taxes, you have all those things to account for too.
yeah, all the like common fees and taxes and all that. So, I think when you figure out your budget, it's actually different than like the first, just the total price that you would see.
And then you also have to, not to interject, but a lot of people don't realize this. Like you also have to account for utilities and like other expenses that are associated with the home, like maintenance, cleaning, things like that. Because I remember distinctly us trying to find something that had like a long enough tax abatement on it too, before we started switching into multifamily. Can I ask you guys then, when you started looking for the apartment search, my memory's a little bit foggy. I haven't gone through our older notes. Was the goal to try subletting it out? Because I remember us distinctly having conversations about like, hey, we want to make sure there's like a somewhat relaxed sublet policy. Is that what the goal was?
Yeah, I think eventually.
Not immediately.
Yeah.
We wanted to live there, but we want to make sure when we move out, if we rent it out, it's gonna cover our mortgage.
Mortgage and everything.
Yeah, and I think whether it was a condo or multi-family, the plan was for it to be an investment and something that we can keep even if we're not
For a while.
living there. And to do that, obviously, we'd have to be able to sublet it or lease it out.
Yeah.
And so I think we weren't really interested in co-ops because of that. And
Some very tight subletting.
yes,
Well, talk to me about this then, Yeji. What sort of happened when we started looking at condos and then we looked at multifamilies? I remember us having somewhat of a conversation about being like, hey, like we're spending $1.5 million on a condo. That's the price point we're looking at. You can find a multifamily for that price point. What made you make the leap? Like what made you make the jump? Because I remember one of the first few days when we were looking at multifamilies exclusively just to look. And then I think a showing or two after you guys said, hey, I think we want to focus on multifamily. So can you explain to the viewers and the listeners what went on behind the scenes? What was the trigger that said, hey, this is what we want to do?
I think we always wanted to look at both. But when we started looking at condos, I got really scared of the common fees. And then it just feels like it never goes away. And then it actually increases every year.
Yep. Just like taxes.
Yeah. And then I've seen like some condos in Manhattan that common fees are like 10K.
Yep. Several.
So I guess if you have it for decades, it just keeps going up, and then at some point it's gonna become 5K.
That's true. It's like, I say this explanation with co-ops because in a co-op, the monthly maintenance, you have a portion of that for your taxes. But because property taxes keep rising, that's why co-op HOA fees keep going up too. For condos, just maintenance fees and things like that will always go up because of inflation. But you're right. It's one of those things where it's like, it's not in your control. You don't have any power or decision over it. You can't be like, no, I don't want to pay this monthly maintenance or condo association fee. And it keeps going up because expenses keep going up in the city. So that was your main thing. You were like, hey, I'm just burning this money. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I got really scared of the common fees. And then on top of that, when they actually do fix something, you have to pay on top of
like an assessment or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, what's the point of these fees?
Yeah, man. That's like that's like me ranting about taxes in the MTA piece to my fiance. I'm like, why am I paying all this stuff? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's good to know. It's the monthly maintenance that's sort of was like, I don't want to pay this.
Yeah.
I have no control over it.
Well, and then some of the buildings that we saw didn't even have amenities. So like, where are this money going towards?
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Can I then ask why like Northern Brooklyn, why Bushwick, Williamsburg? Like, what was it about it that like drew you guys to that, as opposed to other places where you could probably get the same building, if not larger, for a little bit less?
I mean, I've lived in that area for, I think, 8 years now, so very familiar with it. Okay, just really like it a lot. And then I think being close to the L train was important. Yeah, very easy for my commute into the city for work.
Okay. And then what about you? You were just like,
we really like Williamsburg. Okay. And we started looking at Williamsburg, and then I think the price
pushed us out. Yeah.
I feel like Mike has more experience in Bushwick than me, and I feel like Bushwick is really big. So I was overwhelmed by where in Bushwick that we're gonna see. But I really like where we ended up being.
Okay. That's gonna be good. Can I ask then? I know we're gonna jump around a little bit. What was the experience like for you guys when you were looking at multifamily properties? The reason I ask this is because, I mean, as you know, I do a discovery phase because you just don't know what you don't know, and it's very hard to just take my word for it. Doesn't matter how well I do what I do. Can you talk to me from the perspective of like first-time buyers that might be listening and watching this? What was your criteria going into it, and then how did that evolve as you started to see more? And the reason I ask that is I live in the market, so I know a lot of things, and sometimes I know what step number 10 is gonna take, but I
Mhm.
can't I try never to rush my clients there, and I wanna help them get there. What was that for you? Like, what was like you had a misconception going into it, and then as you saw more, you were like, "Oh, okay, actually, this is what the market reality is like."
Mhm.
Mm.
Um, so I think one thing, kind of when we first started seeing multifamilies compared to the condos, within the first maybe couple tours that we did or in the first couple of weeks, I felt like there were multiple that we actually really liked,
Mm.
that were within our budget. With the condos, there weren't really any. And then, like, all of a sudden, yes, there were, like, multiple viable options, which we never really felt like where we were in agreement, like, "Oh, this is actually pretty nice, like, this is something I'd wanna see again."
Oh, okay.
Um, so I think that was one thing, and then I think another thing we kinda learned in the process, of the discovery phase, I think it kind of became clear that we wanted move-in ready.
Mm.
Like, we've been, doing some work, like, painting and renovating kitchen and smaller projects, but nothing like a gut renovation or like where it needs a lot of work.
Mhm.
I think there were some that we saw where maybe you were more excited or like I could tell like the gears were turning in your head. I'm like, you can maximize this one for the most rental income or, like this has more potential for X, Y, or Z. Versus for us, I was like, I don't think this is where I would want to live.
I see. I see.
And so I think that was important too. Like, is it somewhere that's moving ready that we'd be comfortable and like enjoy living there too? Versus like, could we get the maximum amount of rental income out of it?
That's so good. I'm so glad you brought that up because it is something that I'm also learning too in terms of when I'm working with clients that you have a specific numbers goal in mind in terms of like, hey, this is a tangible investment goal that we'd like to do. But also because it's like your first property and you're house hacking, you're also going to be living there. So I think it's a matter of like balancing that yin and yang of like, okay, this works well on paper, but do we value this more than, hey, I actually don't like living in this area. I don't like this street. I don't like this block, whatever it is. Or,
Hmm.
which one do we put more value on? Are we okay with paying a little bit extra or maybe compromising on other things to justify that?
Hmm.
EJ, I'd be curious about to hear from your perspective too, like from the multifamilies, like what misconception did you have going into it? And then what did you sort of learn going out of it?
Mm, I don't know. Try to think.
Was there anything that stood out to you? Any tenant drama stuff?
I don't know. I feel like I didn't go to a lot of tours.
You were traveling a lot afterwards. That's right. That's actually like I saw a lot of them.
Yeah.
Just me and Mo, and
Yeah.
would take videos or like report back. As I think that's actually since I was a little bit more skeptical
Hmm.
initially.
It helped.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I know one of my concerns was like it will be more work, and it is. And I was like, I'll be doing more of that work, like just taking out the trash or sure tenants and fixing things and painting and
Yeah.
all that. It hasn't been too bad so far. We'll see. Right? On a wood. Yeah.
Not that many tours.
Yeah, it's tenants. Yeah. So,
Hey man, you guys are getting there.
yeah.
You guys are getting there.
So, um, yeah, I think that was.
Okay.
I feel like it's when we started singing it, I feel like it was a lot nicer than what I thought it would be.
Okay.
And I feel like that's why Mike felt more comfortable too.
Mm. I think maybe about the buildings that we were saying and the neighborhood since you weren't as familiar with Bushwick.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think when you start to familiarize yourself a lot more with like the unknowns, you're like, oh, okay, this isn't actually as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah. And actually, I just remember, I think the other important thing that we learned in the process, seeing some of these places, was that we really wanted an owner occupied building,
Okay.
because they tend to take better care of it because they're also, we're living there.
Yeah.
Versus something that was, flipped.
Fully tenanted.
Yeah. Or you could tell that it was just, kind of cookie
No.
cutter and meant to be like rental.
And we saw a lot of those.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of those, and it's great because like the one that you guys ended up buying on George Street is also owner occupied, which and that's what you guys are doing now. And there's a different feel to it, right? You walk in, you can tell that this guy, he didn't cheap out on stuff. He built it, he adjusted it to his liking, him and his wife's liking. Can I ask you then? Because I remember when you had initially reached out, you had mentioned, hey, I think you work with one or two other brokers, or like had spoken to them, and things didn't quite well, or things that you didn't feel like much of a spark. Can you talk a little bit about that? And again, I'm not saying this to like toot my own horn or anything. The reason I bring it up is because some brokers are good at some things. Not all brokers are good at everything. I myself am a house hacker investor, so I have a sense of like what you guys are looking for. But can you talk to like the viewers and the listeners? What was that experience like? Even though they may have been great brokers, like what felt like it was missing, or like how did that experience go?
We actually didn't work with any
We
other.
didn't tour, yeah, with any other brokers.
Yeah.
I guess you were talking to some back when you were looking at maybe investing out of state just to have an investment property. So they would like call you and like give you a tour and stuff, but virtual tour.
Where were you looking, if you don't mind me asking?
I was looking at Ohio.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Because that used to be my territory, and I really liked
So you're familiar with that. Oh, I see.
there.
Okay.
I mean, it was a lot cheaper than, New York City or Rica. I was thinking about it, and I worked with a broker, and I really liked her. Um, but I feel like what she was lacking was in like calculation.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like I would do more calculation and saying like, oh, I feel like the money doesn't work. But I feel like she didn't really help me with that.
I
And
see it.
she would send me some stuff that was like out of my budget or it wouldn't really work.
The price point didn't work. Okay.
Or
No.
the rent wouldn't.
The rent wouldn't cover the
I got it.
yeah.
Yeah, I've run into similar scenarios with that, both as a broker and as like an end client too. And it's like it's frustrating because you feel like you're having like you tell someone, hey, like here's a rough idea of what I'm sort of looking for, and then it's like they'll be like, hey, what about this and what about this? Like, well, this doesn't work. Do you even like listen to what I was saying?
Throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah, you're just like throwing stuff because you think I'm gonna buy whatever it is. Like, no, I want to see what's going on. So I can understand that frustration. On the other side, as a broker too, and this is why I like to do a discovery phase, is I'll tell people like, hey, let's look at things that are slightly under the numbers you wanted and slightly above, because you need to get a sense of where the market's at right now. It doesn't matter what I tell you. Can you talk to me about the multifamily perspective, and how I had told you guys, hey, like sometimes things are going to be out of our control because some properties are going to be fully tenanted. Can you talk about it from the perspective of the issues that we had to deal with, if you remember them, as well as what was your perspective when I had said, hey, do you prefer to be fully vacant, or are you okay with inheriting the leases and the tenants? Because sometimes people say, hey, no, I'm fine if the tenant, if they have good records and they have, rental receipts and everything, that's fine. Can you talk about that from your perspective? Because there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. So I just want to hear more.
Um, yeah, I mean, I remember discussing it with you and kind of some of the pros and cons of inheriting the tenants or not. Like if you inherit the tenant, then you'll have rental income free up day one, which for some people that's probably important. Can make the mortgage payment a lot easier right away.
Yeah.
Versus taking some time to kind of get stuff ready and find your own tenants. And as you talked about, like for first time buyers, I think we are definitely glad that we had it
Vacant?
yeah.
Okay.
Because it's given us time to work on what we want and like move in and settle in. And I think as you alluded to earlier, there were some issues with one of the tenants that was in the building.
Yeah.
Previously.
Issue is a nice way to say, Do you remember any of that stuff? You remember?
I think.
Yeah, if you could share, because it's helpful to talk about it. Even like everything's done. The tenants can't come after you or anything. They're not your tenants anymore. It's good to share because a lot of times people will, just like you had mentioned, the unfamiliar will always seem like a much bigger problem than it is. And my perspective is always, hey, there's never a problem that we can't solve. We just have to power through it and figure it out. So can you talk about like how you felt through it, like what the actual issue was, and like, how we sort of overcame it?
Yeah. So I think we had made an offer and they had accepted it. So we were, kind of at that stage in the process where you wanted to schedule an inspection.
Yeah.
And it got canceled or delayed like on the day of at the
Last minute. Yeah.
And I think what ended up happening was one of the current tenants, or I guess both of the tenants had leases that went through the end of the year, whenever they ended. And so the owner or the seller had an agreement with them that he would I don't know, pay them a certain amount of money or help them buy out their lease and help them, find security deposit for the next place or something like that. So they both had agreed to a number. Um, and then once I think the tenant realized things were getting serious, they had accepted our offer. They decided to hold out for more money, which, they had the power to do that, I guess, because they had a lease and they hadn't, agreed to anything yet. So they canceled last minute, and it was kind of up to the owner, I guess, to fix out how to solve that problem. Yeah.
Yeji, what were your thoughts going through when that was happening? Because a lot of times people will, especially when it's their first property, it's very easy to take things really personally and feel like, oh my God, that's it. The whole world is ending. Can you talk about like what your perspective was?
I would say I was glad that we didn't inherit.
Oh, yeah. This seemed really nice. Yeah. As a first.
There we go. We did the short, we did the tours. Yeah.
They were, young and like
Professional.
mysterious people, but I guess you never know.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows what kind of headaches they could have inherited them if they had stuck around and then absolutely decided to hold out something from us.
It's, I tell people all the time, like I love real estate because it's the people. It's what I enjoy. And I also hate real estate because of the people, and I'll give a background to anyone that's listening or watching this. So we had accepted offers, we had a tour, we had the inspection, everything scheduled. And I think we had gone back twice, if I'm not mistaken. I think once with you and then once both of us, all of us together. And what ended up happening was, the landlord, the owner, agreed to do a full vacant delivery, so they'd be terminating the leases early with their tenants. And this was something that was not news to the tenants. They knew the house was on the market. They knew like something was going to happen. Tenants initially agreed. They negotiated like a little bit of a buyout. I believe it was like 10,000 each group of tenants, and that was okay. This is what I'm hearing from their broker. And then on the day of, they canceled the inspection, and the broker called me, and she was irate. She was flipped off because the owner was so pissed off that he wanted to cancel the whole deal because of how badly his tenants were treating him, even though he was so good to them, because they had come back to him and said, hey, instead of 10,000, we want 30,000. And he's like, I am not doing this. He was really pissed off. And I think it took like about another week of the broker and I communicating and being like, hey, like, is he still walking away with enough money? Can we still like get this done? Because we don't want to, definitely we don't want to inherit these tenants anymore, but this deal's not going to work out. And then I guess the owner just swallowed his pride and was like, fine, whatever. And I guess the people that walked out on top besides us is the tenants. They got 30,000 in cash, that's, and I'm putting it out there, by the way, because I can like look up all the property records and whoever lived there. These guys were well off. I found their LinkedIn's and everything. These guys were very well off. They were making like good 6-figure income. So I don't know why people do this.
Because they had the borrowing powers. Yeah.
But the owners, the sellers were like really nice.
They're a sweet couple, yeah, and they're like, yeah, move. And they took really good care of the home too, like you could tell.
Sure, they were good landlords.
Yeah, it seemed like it. Can you talk about then where you are right now with the property? Because I know you're probably gonna get soon to getting it rented out. Like, how's that looking for you guys? How are you guys feeling?
Yeah. We're definitely ready or anxious that happen it soon. It's been a few months of paying the full mortgage. We initially moved into the second floor unit because we redid the floors in our unit.
I remember that, yeah.
And because of some other things going on in life, we had to kind of move in very quickly. We overstayed our old lease.
Did they say anything to you, by the way? Because I remember this was
no, we offered to pay longer and they said they couldn't do that. They could only do a full year lease because his rent
stabilized. Yeah.
So we're like, okay, well, we tried to pay and they didn't want. So we just stayed.
You guys are good people. And so
they
they
didn't give us any issues. But we had to move out pretty quickly, and so we renovated the floors in our unit, and then moved back down to that one. We've been painting the rental units, so that's pretty much good to go. We did a small kitchen renovation in the rental unit, and just working with a plumber now to get the stove hooked up.
Okay.
That's been fun.
Good stuff. Can I ask AJ then, how do you guys feel about being landlords soon? What is that? Is it starting to like become real? Like, have you guys like put feelers out there to get like rental applications and everything?
Not really. We haven't really done much. I am getting a little bit nervous, sorry, because we were paying our mortgage at Gorsend, and it's a large mortgage.
Yeah.
Because, we were paying for
The whole property.
the whole building.
Yeah.
But you have been kind of researching the neighborhood and getting a feel for the market.
Yeah, how much we should rent it out for. I've been doing that.
And the summer's coming up, so
Yeah.
you got good time to list it. So
it won't be an issue finding someone in
Yeah.
that place. I think you will have the pick of the pick of the crop. If I could give any just one single advice, anyone that's watching, listening to, uh, always put sort of feelers out there first, just to see what it's like, even if you're not ready to rent it out. The reason I say that is because you can test the market. So I think you can create like your own, let's say for example, Zillow or SheetEasy account, and if you put out a certain price, if you feel like you're getting more than 10 to 15 applications or contacts a day, then it's priced a little bit too high. Just price a little bit too low. Price it a little bit higher and then sort of get a sense of it, because then you'll only be getting the serious people. I know we can have a conversation offline about like how to screen tenants, what you can and can't say, what's legal, what's illegal, fair housing, all that stuff. Can I ask then, what is like the top advice you would give someone that's in your shoes right now that hasn't, they're just like, hey, we just got the pre-approval. We know we want to buy something. We don't want to keep renting. Our lease is running out in 6 months.
Mhm.
Like, what's the advice you would give them as they start their search?
I think starting the search, definitely keep an open mind.
Mm,
Um, we had, like you said, we had the two different phases to our search, condo and the multifamily. So I think having those in separate phases was definitely helpful too. Like if you're seeing, one condo and two multifamily in the same day, and then trying to keep track of everything, like
it's crazy.
yeah. So I think kind of dividing it up into phases was good. Um, we had a Excel sheet that the three of us all were editing and adding notes and tracking prices and which ones we toured, and so that was helpful, and it did a good job of keeping that up to date and contributing to.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the debriefing sessions
Mhm.
we'd do before and after.
Yeah, that was fun, right?
I
Yeah.
think that was good. So like going into a place, you'd be like, okay, here's what to look for. This is kind of the situation. Then afterwards, we'd all kind of meet to go over what we just saw.
Pros, cons, compromising what we can't compromise on. That's good. That's good feedback for me too. Thank you. What about you, G?
I would say just start seeing in person.
Mm.
Just get out there and start looking at it, because I feel like before we started looking at it, we were looking at Street Easy and Billow, and we were like, oh, there are so many apartments that we like. We're not going to have any issues finding an apartment.
Sure.
And then we started looking at condoms, and we didn't like any of them.
Yeah, and we've seen in person. Yeah, yeah, it's a different feeling.
I feel like seeing in person and doing, calculations about how much you're actually paying is, I think, helpful.
Absolutely. I think one thing I'm hearing too, it's like you may not realize this, but it helps to have the right team with you to help you like facilitate all of that. And the reason I say that is because like I've represented buyers, I've represented sellers too. And sometimes when I'm representing sellers and I, work with a buyer and there's another broker that's coming in, and some of these lenders have no idea what they're doing. You're just sort of like asking them information. They're like, oh, yeah, sure. Yes, no. I'm like, does your buyer know how much they're going to be paying for this? Like, they understand it. And like the reason we do all that work upfront, the discovery phase, all that stuff, and the numbers and planning it out and the pros, cons, the debriefing is because it's better to do it then than when you're in contract and now you're going to be at risk of losing out your deposit. Then it's like, it's not a good experience for anyone. Um, I guess can you explain then, maybe as a last question, what is like one regret each of you may have through the process? Is there anything that you're like, oh, if I went back, I probably would have done this differently?
Mm.
Mm, feeling.
Um,
Take your time.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, we also had some delays in actually closing. But I don't know if there's anything we could have done different on that, because we were cleared to close
Yeah,
quickly.
true.
And it just, there was stuff that the seller was waiting for from the city.
Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, the city, the paperwork and everything for the liens.
That was kind of the most stressful part. And
Mhm.
then we had locked in our rate, and we locked it in at a
Hit
really
an extension. Yeah,
we locked it in when they were like the lowest point in the last few years, and then they kept having to do extensions because the lock was expiring, and then we were having to pay for the points now to get back to the rate that we had already locked in. So that was a little bit painful and stressful. Um, but I don't know if we could have really timed that in either with locking in the rate. Like we locked it at a really good time.
yeah.
Maybe align with that, like start early, because you may
Closing.
feel like
Yeah, 100%.
Whatever we did, on or about
Yeah, yeah.
November. It's never there. Yeah, yeah. We're like, oh, maybe it'll be a week or two before that date, and like,
Wishful thinking, yeah, right?
we thought we were gonna be dead
Yeah,
3 weeks
we'll be done, we'll move in, everything will be good. Yeah, it's one of those things I tell people too, is it's like, it's never just according to our schedule. We have the seller's schedule, the bank, the attorneys, and then with multifamily, the tenant's schedule too. And it's like so frustrating. I don't know if you remember, like we had to sometimes go back to the same property to look because like we saw one unit, the tenant didn't allow the other units, we had to go back in. But no, this has been really helpful. I think you guys dropped a lot of golden nuggets, and I don't think you realize it, but it's like really helpful for people to watch this, especially for folks that are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I want to be in Bushwick, or I know I want to buy multifamily. Is it right for me? So I really appreciate you guys sharing your story, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.